To do this one, you just you put it into y equals mx plus c form. So, and then this one is x. And for a unique solution, m1 is not equal to m2. Therefore, k on 3 is not equal to 5 on k plus 2. When you solve that, you should get k is negative 5, or k is not equal to negative 5, k is not equal to 3, and then you get b. For this one, if you just sketch it on your CAS, the graph should look something like this. And then you can tell here that this is stationary point of inflection, so that's C. This, with log, you know that the domain of log has to be from 0 to infinity, so 2x plus 1 has to be greater than 0, so that becomes x is greater than negative half, so that's B. Question 4, if you just put it into your CAS, you'll get A. And then question 5, you can just define this on your CAS, or you can just like try out all the possible solutions. D is the right answer, and it's because fx minus y is equal to x minus y squared, which equals x squared minus 2x plus 2y, which isn't the same as x squared minus y squared.
So you mean plus y squared?
Oh yeah, sure. And then in question 6, the way to do this is that, you know, z is equal to x minus mu on standard deviation. So probability x is greater than 17 is equal to probability x minus mu divided by standard deviation. And then you just sub in the values. So mean is 14, standard deviation is 2. And then you'll get probability. Oh, wait. No, okay. So then rearranging this, you get x equals standard deviation z plus mean. So then probability x is greater than 17 is equal to probability standard deviation z plus mu is greater than 17, which equals probability 2z plus 14, which is greater than 17, which will equal probability z is greater than 3 on 2. And because in normal distribution it's symmetrical, you know that if we have the graph, if 3 on 2 is here, this is the same as this, which is negative 3 on 2. So this is the same as probability z is less than negative 3 on 2. So that's why it's D. Then 7, this is just, you diff this, which you will get as this and then you sub in x equals 0, and then from that you will get B. For question 8, what you can do is you can just solve for the gradient function, which would be and then you just solve this on your CAS and make it less than 0. And then doing that, you get C as your answer. For this question, you know that f-1 is equal to 2 because it's given that the tangent at the point 1 is 3 plus 2x, so this gradient corresponds with this x value. And so, with the curve fx minus 2, what that means is that the graph is translated 2 units to the right. So, this 1 is the same as f-3, which is the gradient of 2. And then, it's saying the tangent at the point 3, 8. So now we know what the gradient is. So we can just sub in y equals 3x plus c, where c is a constant. And then we sub in the point 3, 8. So when we sub in 3, 8, what you get is 8 equals 9 plus c, where c equals negative 1. Right. Wait. Oh no, this isn't 3. It's 2. That's my bad.
So that's not fine.
So, because the gradient is 2, you sub in y equals 2x plus c. Then you sub in 3, 8. So then you get 8 equals 6 plus c, where c equals 2. Therefore, y equals 2x plus 2. And your answer is E. Now, this one, what you need to understand is that when x is between 0 and 1, the possible values is 0.4. When x is between here, it's actually 0.4 to 0.6. And then here, it would be 0.6 to 0.9. And then here would be 0.9 to 1. And so because of that, the median of x is when probability x equals x is 0.5. And 0.5 only lies between 1. And because it's discrete, there's no connections. So that's why B is the answer and not like any of these decimal point values. For this one, you just integrate from a to half pi sine 2 pi on x, and you make that equal to 0.2, and you will and if you solve that, you'll get D as your answer. For question 12, it's just a transformation. So what you do is you rearrange y, so you get y minus 3 over negative 3 sine 2x plus pi. Then what you do is y dash minus 1 over negative 3 equals y. Rearrange for y dash. And then when you look at the transformations, D is the correct answer, because half x minus pi on 2, that corresponds to this, and the 3's, that corresponds. 13, this is binomial, and so what it's asking for is that, you know the probability of success when tossing a fair coin is 0.5 both sides. So probability of success would be 0.5. And then this, it says it's tossed 12 times, so number of trials is 12. And doing that, what you're solving for is at most 4 heads are obtained, which means probability x is less than or equal to 4. So when you plug in those values into your CAS, you'll get C as your answer using binomial CDF. And then 14 is mod, so we'll just skip that. 15 is just dy. If you change the notation of y, you'll get this. And then dy on dx is just using chain rule, that. And then times, when we diff this, you get f dash x times negative. So that will be the same as negative f dash x over 2 root 1 minus fx, which is E. For this one, what you can do is just, for inverse functions, you just basically substitute x with y. So you get x equals e 2y plus 3. And then when you rearrange, you get log e of x is equal to 2y plus 3. And then you get 2y equals log e x minus 3. Y equals half log e x minus 3 on 2. And using log laws, you know that half log e x is the same as log e x to the power of half, which is log e root x. And then that means that C is your only answer. For 17, with independent events, you need to know that probability A times probability. You need to know that probability A intersection B is equal to probability A times probability B. And because of that, probability of A is just 3 over 6. And then probability B is which is half. And then what?
No, the first one should be 2 over 6.
What?
It should be 2 over 6 and take into account.
2 over 6. You good? Let's say something else.
Oh, it's not, hang on. It should be 2 over 12.
2 over 12.
Sorry. Should be into 6.
Yeah, which is okay. And then b is 1/3, and then when you multiply them, it becomes 1/6.
Yeah, that's right.
And so because of that, a is the only one that works. And then 18. Average value just means the form would be 1 over k because the boundary is from 0 to k. 0 to k, you're integrating 1 over 6 log e of 7 dx. And that will be your average value answer. And when you evaluate that, you get B is your answer. With question 19, when you change the dilation by a whole number, you're actually like tightening it or like dilating it basically. And then basically it means that it will become less widened. And also because this is negative, what you're doing is you're flipping the graph and you're moving it up +1. So because of that, this turning point here, well, this y-intercept becomes -3, and then you're adding 1, so that becomes -2. And so if you look at this, the only y-intercepts that work is E or A. But the issue is that, as I said, it becomes less wider because of this 2 dilation, and that's why E is your right answer. And then with question 20, what you can do is you can just solve this on your CAS, and when you solve on your CAS, you get 9 solutions. So yeah. And then 21. Okay, so if the cubic function, you don't know what the cubic function is, but you know that f dash x equals 0 when x equals 2 or x equals -3. So that means instantly you can tell that there will be a local max or a local min at these 2 points. So instantly everything else is gone. And then when you sub in this -3 value, you can tell that it's a min. And so B is your right answer. Then 22, you can't, because it's a log graph, you can't actually integrate. Because if you draw the graph looks something like this. And then y equals 3. And it's asking for this area. And you can't actually solve for that because it's a log graph and it's undefined from 0 to 1. So what you can do is you can take the inverse of the graph. So the inverse would be x equals log. And then what you do is you just integrate from, because now that it's because it's in terms of y now, you can do 0 to 3 because that's the inverse, because when the x-intercepts of the normal graph is the same as the y's on the inverse. And so when you do this, your answer is D. For question 2, when it says strictly decreasing, for VCAA, they make it include the derivative when the gradient is 0. I don't know why, but they do. So first what you have to do is you have to find the gradient function, which is 3 over root x take away 1. And then you just solve that to be less than or equal to 0. And when you solve that, you get x is greater than or equal to 9. And then on the set of the axes above, sketch y equals mod fx. We know that what mod does is that it just reflects the graph in the positive direction. So this negative part becomes positive, and you're just doing that. And then this part, same goes. So there. And then question C. A has coordinates 1, 0. B has coordinates 25, 0. Find the length AD and such that the area of rectangle ABCD is equal to the area of the shaded region. So first, to do this, you need to figure out what the area of the shaded region is. So the area of the shaded region is from 1 to 25, integrating fx dx. For solving that, when you solve that, you get 64 units, 64. And then basically what you have to do is you let this part equal a random constant, and then the area of the rectangle would be equal to a times by 25 take away 1, which is 24a, which equals the area given of the graph, which is this, so 64. So a equals 64 over 24, which is the same as 8 on 3, and that's your answer. No, that's not squared. D, the gradient of the chord. This is literally just, you know from like year 7 that m is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So just using that idea, what you're doing is you're just solving for 3 take away 0 over 16 take away 25, which is 3 over negative 9, which is negative 1 on 3. And then for this, what you're doing is f dash a, from the previous question, they've given you the graph. F dash a is the same as 3 over root a take away 1. And then equals m. We solved m in the previous question to be negative 1 on 3. So then you just make this equal negative 1 on 3. And then on your CAS, you just solve for a. And you get a equals 81 on 4. For EI, f of gx is just, what you're doing is you're subbing gx into what fx is. Fx is equal to 6 root x minus x take away 5. And then what you're doing is you're literally just doing, when gx is x squared, this becomes 6 root x squared take away x squared minus 5. Basically, you're subbing gx. Instead of x, you're subbing an x squared. And doing that, you know root x squared is mod. That's just the definition. And then that's what f of gx is. And then these, do I do this question or do I just skip it? Oh yeah. And then hx is just, it's what you can do. You know hx is equal to 6x minus x squared take away 5, or negative 6x take away x squared minus 5. This is due to the property of the mod graph. So you're taking the positive of the mod and the negative of the mod, and you're considering them as a hybrid function. And then when you do h dash x, what you're doing is you're just diffing these two different hybrid functions. And so you get 6 take away 2x and negative 6 take away 2x. And just note that it's a point of discontinuity at x is 0, because it just doesn't make sense, because if you sketch the two different hybrid graphs, they don't connect at 0, so it doesn't make sense to include 0. And what happens is that one of the graphs will look like this, the other graph will look like this.
Shadman, should be excluded on the bottom as well.
Huh?
Should be excluded on the bottom as well.
The important points. Make sure that these are open circles, because as I said before, the function isn't defined at 0, and this is negative 3, 0. With this question, 3 simultaneous equations, what you can do is the information that's given to you is that the gradient at n is, well, we first know that n is 2, 0. We know that the curve has a turning point at 4, so this point here is 4, something. We can just call it a for now. And then write down this information in terms of a, b, and c. So what we know, first we'll find what the gradient function is, which is... Now, what we know is that the gradient at n is 0.06. So that means f dash 2, which equals 3a plus b when you sub in x into ddx of y on 50 is equal to negative 0.06. That's your first equation. Your second equation is that there's a turning point at x equals 4. So what that means is that at f-4, the gradient is equal to 0, which when you sub in x is that. That's your second equation. And then your third equation, what you've done is you found a and b, but you haven't found c. So what you need to do is you have to look at fx, not f-x. And you know that f of 2, this part here, means f of 2 is 0. So f of 2 is just 8a plus 4b plus c over 200, which equals 0. That's your third equation. And that's that. And then here we can just use simultaneous. So 3a plus b over 50 equals negative 3 over 50. So 3a plus b equals negative 3. What you can do is you can just write down the equation. So 6a plus b on 25 equals 0. And then 3a plus b on 50 equals negative 0.06. And then when I rearrange 1, I get b equals negative 6a. And then when I sub this b value back into 2, I get negative 3a on 50. No. Yeah, I get negative 3a on 50 is equal to negative 6 on 100. And then when I solve for a, I get a equals 6 times 50 over 100 times 3, which is literally just 1. Yeah. And then when I sub a, the new value that you found, back into 1, you get 6 plus b over 25 equals 0. Therefore, b has to equal negative 6. And then, when I sub back in my third equation, when I sub a comma b into this equation, you get 8 minus 24 plus c equals 0. That means c has to equal 16. And there's your answers. And then find the coordinates of m and p. Now we know what the actual fx function is. So I'll just define that before we start. So that's just 200 x cubed minus 6x squared plus 16. And then what we have to do is m and p are x-intercepts. So you just make fx equals 0, and solving that, you get x is equal to 2 root 3 plus 2, 2 minus 2 root 3, and you get the value of, you get the n value too, which, you get the n value too, which is 2. And then, just from looking at it, you know that m has to be the highest value, so that means m has to equal 2 root 3 plus 2, comma 0, because this says coordinate form, and then n has to equal the lowest value. Alright, no, you're looking for p, so p is the lowest value, so p is just, p is 2 minus 2 root 3, comma 0. And then the length of the tunnel, the question says that the tunnel is from n to p. So that means the length of the tunnel is just going to be n. Oh no, the length of the tunnel is, so what you do is you just do 2 root 3 plus 2, take away 2, take away 2 root 3. And then doing that, you get 4 root 3 as your answer. Oh, no, that's wrong. Yeah, you just do, Where? Do you get 2 root 3? Oh yeah, no, you do. Yeah, because it's from n to p. So what it's saying is p is 2 root 3. P is 2 take away 2 root 3. And n is 2. So what you're doing is 2 take away 2 take away 2 root 3. And that is equal to 2 root 3. And that's your answer. And then the maximum depth of the valley occurs at this point, f of 4. So you just sub in 4 into your fx equation. You get negative 225, and therefore your max depth has to be And then question C. What you need to know is that the initial speed is you can find the initial speed just using this equation here. And so what you do is W is equal to K times log E of. Now it's given that the distance is from the front of the train from P, and the initial speed, as it says in the question, occurs at point P. So that means your distance at the initial speed is going to be 0. And so that's just 1 over 7. And then when it's saying find the value of K, you just solve, you rearrange, and then you get this. And then when you solve for this, you know that 120 log E of 2 divided by log E of 7 is equal to K times log E of 3.5 over 7. That means your K value will now be Now, when you find W, you just plug in this value. You just plug in this value into this equation, and then when you solve for that, you should get W as 120. And then the exact distance, what you're doing is you're just finding, you're solving 0 equals negative 120 over ln 7 log E d plus 1 over 7, because you're using the velocity equation, and your K value you already found, and your D value is just, no, you're looking for, and then, you just solve for that. Because your velocity when the train stops is going to be 0. And so when you solve, you get D is 6, but you can't stop there, because that means, if you look at the graph, it means it stopped here. And the question is asking from here to here. So that means your actual distance is going to be 6.2 minus 6, which equals 0.2. And that's your answer. And then question 3, this is probability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a variable such as x. This variable will represent the diameter of the ball. And then what it's asking is that you're using normal distribution because it says the graph is distributed normally. And then your mean is given as 67, your standard deviation is given as 1. And it's asking for less than 68.5, probability x is less than 68.5. And then when you solve that on your CAS, you get 0.9332. And then for this, would like the diameter to be between that. So what you're doing is you're just doing probability x is between 68.4 and 65.6. And then when you solve that, you get 0.8385. Now with question CI, this may look like it's the same question as B, but it's not, because there's a different condition that's given. So what it's asking for is probability. The question, what it's asking is probability x is between 68.4 and 65.6, given that x is less than 68.5. Because that's what it means by the diameter of the tennis ball fits into the tin. And when you basically evaluate that, you get x is between 68.4 and 65.6 divided by probability x is less than 68.5. And then when you evaluate that, you get 0.8985 as your answer. Now with II, I'm just gonna basically, now it's asking for the number of balls, and so I'm gonna let that variable be y, and then what it's asking is that for the diameter to be outside this range. So your probability of success will change. Your probability of success will now be one takeaway this value that you found here, which is equal to when I put that into my CAS, (0.1015). And now what you're doing is you're distributing this with binomial, because there's a number of trials now. Where your number of trials is 4, your probability of success, which you just found, is that. And you're solving such that probability of y is greater than or equal to 1. And so, when you evaluate that, you get 0.3482 as your answer. Okay, this question, it's basically, looking at it, you have to understand that it's talking about confidence intervals. And you know that a confidence interval is equal to the mean plus or minus some constant, which we'll call A, times standard deviation. Now, first what you have to recognize is that to find this A constant, what it means, because the percentage is 99%, what you're doing is you're finding the probability of the standard normal distribution of negative A and A being 0.99. And when you solve for that, the only way you can solve that on your CAS is you have to recognize that if you draw a graph, if this is negative A, and that's 0.99, then negative infinity to negative A will be 0.005. And this will also be 0.005. So then what you have to recognize is that probability, z being less than negative A, probability of z being less than negative A is equal to 0.05. And then when you use the inverse norm function on your CAS, you get z as 2.58. Oh, yeah. And then your new confidence interval will then be the mean, which is given as 67, plus or minus your new constant, which you just found. This is A. No. Mean is 67, plus or minus the new constant you found, standard deviation, times standard deviation. Now your lower interval is going to be 65.6, your higher one is going to be 68.4. You can choose either, it doesn't really matter. So I'll just use the lower. It is equal to 65.6. And then when you solve for that, your standard deviation is 0.54. Okay. Next one, this is talking about tree diagrams. And basically what it's asking, what is the exact probability that it will buy tennis balls from BBC for the next 3 years? What you need to recognize is that first, it's given that the current year, they're buying a tennis ball. So from the information given, what it's asking is to find the probability that you buy it 3 times. And you know that if a tennis club buys its ball from BBC 1 year, there's an 80% chance it will buy its balls the next year. So you're just doing 0.8 cubed because you're buying it 3 times. And then when you evaluate that, that's 0.512. The next question is asking for exactly 2 of the next 3 years. So what that's asking for is probability BB buying 2 times and then not buying the 3rd year, plus probability buying once, not buying the 2nd year and then buying again, plus the probability not buying the 1st year and buying the next 2 years. Now that is equal to 0.8 squared times 0.2 plus 0.2 times 0.15 times 0.8 plus 0.8 times 0.2 times 0.15 using the conditions given in the question. And when you evaluate that, that's 0.176. G is long-term probability, which is out of the study design, so we're going to skip that. Question 4. What it's asking is to show that H is 2R, and using similar triangles, it shows that this is the same as this. 8 and the radius is 4. So instantly you know that 2R has to be H, just using similar triangles. And then II, the volume of a cone, because the question talks about, it says inverted right circular cone. So the volume of a cone is pi r squared h on 3. So when we diff that, then you sub in this value, h equals 2r, because it says hence. And so, because it's asking for it in terms of h, if we rearrange for r, you get r equals h on 2. So v is now h on 2 squared times h divided by 3, and v will then become pi h cubed over 12. Show the dh ddt of h. So the best way to do these questions is to look at the units. So this is meters per hour, so you instantly know that it's height over time. And so what you're doing is you know what dv, first you have to solve for dv on dh, which is pi h squared on 4. And then dv on dt, you know dv on dt is equal to dv on dh times dh on dt. And so it's asking to solve for dh on dt. So you know what dv on dh is, and dv on dt is given here because it says meters cubed per hour. That's why. And so that means 9 pi on 4 is equal to pi h squared on 4 times dh on dt. And then when you rearrange, dh on dt is equal to 9 pi on 4 times 4 over pi h squared, which is just 9 over h squared. And then ci, the rate at which the height is increasing when the height is 2 meters. So what you're doing is you literally just sub in h is 2, and you get 9 on 4. And then next question, with the height of the acid when it's increasing at half the rate found in ci. So what you're doing is 9 on h squared is equal to half of 9 on 4. And then when you solve for h, you get h equals 2 root 2, as h is greater than 0 because you get plus or minus, but it doesn't make sense in the question for h to be negative. ddh of t is just this flipped around. So dt on dh is just going to be h squared on 9 because it's flipped. And then hence find an expression. Now, because we flipped the operator, we can actually integrate in terms of h now. So what we're just going to do is you do this. And then this becomes h cubed over 27 plus c. Now what you need to recognize is that in the question, it's given that the vat is initially empty. So that means when at the time of 0, the height is going to be 0. So when you sub in t is 0, h is 0 into this, you get c equals 0. And that means t has to be h cubed on 27. That means h cubed equals 27t, and h has to equal 3t to the power 1 on 3. This question, write an expression for the distance of the base of the statue above ground level t hours after 9 a.m. So, the total distance at which it first starts is 8 plus 6. So your total distance initially is 14. Because that's where the statue starts. And then, it's given in the question that at 9 a.m., the tribe starts to lower the marble statues at a rate of 1 meter per hour. So that means this is just going to be t, because it's decreasing at a rate of 1 meter. So that's your distance. And then at what time would the statue first touch the acid? You're just doing that is equal to this equation that you found previously, which is just 3t 1 on 3. And then when you solve for that, you get t equals 8. But you can't stop there because it says at what time. And it's given that in the question it's given that it starts at 9 a.m. So 9 a.m. plus 8 hours is 17. And 17 is 5 p.m. So therefore, statue touches acid first at 5 p.m. And that's it.